Everybody, listen carefully.
You're listening to the SEC Insider Hit on the Boat Bound Show.
Fueled by Fleetway Market.
Fuel up your car and cooler at Fleetway this football season.
Let's go.
The Out of Bounds show is driven by the Ram trucks at Mack Hike in Flowood, MackHikeFlowwood.com for your next Ram truck, pre-owned or new, Jeep Grand Cherokee. We're live in the Bank Plus studio. Our guests join us on the Yuengling Lager guest line. We welcome in our friend Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com, Saints NFL insider, and, of course, author of the book Payton and Breeze, the men who built the greatest offense in NFL history. Jeff Duncan, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Bo, I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing well. I appreciate you taking some time. I want to start with Sean Payton and his future. And Sean's in the media. He's been making the media rounds. I listened to his interview on the Ryan Russillo podcast, and he is going to be wooed and courted. What do you think Sean Payton is going to do in the next few weeks, Jeff?
I think he's going to continue to sit back and survey the landscape and see what develops. I mean, there's not a lot, in my opinion, of intriguing options for Sean Payton. But, Bo, you know this. I mean, every year there seems to be a surprise opening no one's foreseeing. No one can predict. If something like that happens, then I think it opens up different possibilities for him. I know he wants to coach next year. That's clear, but he's not just going to run out and take any job. He's not just going to take a job to take a job. He very much wants to work in a successful, functional organization where every coach, their top priority is, do you have a chance to win? Your chances of being successful. And he's going to go to an organization where that exists. And if one doesn't open, then I think he'll be fine sitting out another year, doing TV. I mean, he's playing a lot of golf. He's traveling with his wife. They're doing a lot of fun things. I think he'll be fine doing that if something doesn't materialize.
Do you think he'll never say this, but do you think he would love to be the coach for Justin Herbert and the LA Chargers?
Oh, yes. No question about that. I mean, he's living in LA right now. That's where he's working Fox Sports. Got a place on Manhattan Beach, not a bad place to be living. And Justin Herbert is, in my opinion, maybe the single most talented quarterback in the league, behind maybe Patrick Mahomes. You could even make an argument he's more talented than him. He's a freak. So, yes, he would love that. But I think people have gotten caught up too much in trying to predict the Payton sweepstakes in looking at where the quarterbacks are. I think that's way overrated.
Okay.
When you look at organizational functionality and ownership and management, that's what's most important on this list, without question. And there's still some questions in the Chargers organization. I mean,
sure.
The Spanos family, there's a history, there's a track record there. And so I don't think it's a done deal, even if it opened, but there's a lot of things that would add up.
So that may take out Arizona, because Arizona hasn't, for the most part, Jeff, you've been covering the league for about 30 years. For the most part, the Arizona Cardinals have not been able to get out of their own way. And even though, let's say Kyler's going to be okay, which most guys are today, Dak had a gruesome a lot of these guys have had just terrible injuries, and they can come back because of the sports medicine and therapy today. That could take out an Arizona-type franchise that hasn't operated at optimal level for more than maybe a year or two in the last 20 years.
Right. A lot of people have tried to put Sean Payton there. I don't see it. I don't see it at all, for all the reasons you mentioned. And then here's one thing I would say about the quarterback situation. I don't think it necessarily, if you don't have a quarterback, I don't think it rules out Payton going there. But if you got a bad quarterback situation, I don't think he's going anywhere near there. And I think Arizona has a terrible quarterback situation. You have a guy that's hurt. You don't even know when he's going to come back.
Right.
I don't even know what Payton thinks of Kyler Murray. He may not like him at all. I mean, he has very strong opinions about certain quarterbacks. I know, talking to him this offseason, he did not like Deshaun Watson. He did not want Deshaun Watson. in New Orleans. If he would have been the coach here, that would not have even been a pursuit. He has strong opinions. The only reason I bring that up is because he will get on a guy or off a guy very, very clearly. And so I don't know how he feels about Kyler Murray, but you can't – if you don't like him, you're stuck with him. That contract is immovable. So that, to me, was another major reason why I don't see it happening there.
If you had to bet a few $100s, would you say he spends one more year out of the game doing media and waiting for that really, really good opportunity?
Well, Bo, that's where it's leaning right now. But if something happens, I mean, look, if and I love Mike McCarthy. I'm a big fan of McCarthy. I think he gets a way too short a shrift from people. The guy, all he does is win games. I mean, they're winning again big this year, and people are still looking for his job. But if they go to Tampa, and that's what probably is going to happen here in week 1 of the playoffs, and get beat, I mean, all bets are off. I mean, Jerry Jones is a motivated guy to win another Super Bowl, and that team is way more talented than the Bucs. But that's a dangerous game. I mean, in defense of Mike McCarthy, that's a no-lose situation for the Bucs, right? You're at home, you have a terrible season, and you get a one shot to knock off the Cowboys in Tampa. To me, that's a very difficult game. The Saints learned that lesson when they went out to Seattle a few years ago.
I remember.
So, yeah, it's not going to be an easy game, but that's the one possibility that if that were to open and Jones were to move off McCarthy, I think that would be a very strong marriage because that team is ready to win a Super Bowl, and Sean Payton could take it over the top. But otherwise, I think he sits out. I don't think that everything I've been able to gather, the Saints are happy with the way this team has finished this year. They're supporting Dennis Allen. This out of principle alone, I don't think Mickey Loomis and Gail Benson would want to move after 1 year. First of all, they'd have to stroke a massive check to do it. They could do it, but it'd be difficult. And then it just the optics of it are not the way they've operated in the past.
Okay. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com, NFL Saints Insider on the Yuengling Lager guest line. You mentioned if things unraveled for the Cowboys and they lost their first playoff game on the road and Jerry Jones, decided to fire Mike McCarthy. I know we've linked Sean Payton and Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones forever because he coached there and so on. But would Sean go into – there's kind of dysfunctional too because Jerry and Stephen have never really been able to let go of something that they're really not good at, and that's the personnel part of it with the Cowboys. I could argue they should have easily added, a wide receiver going into the year, a defense. It's simple things. Do you think Sean would be able to function and work with them because, like reading your book, talking to you, having you up here – Sean is such a strong personality, and Mickey Loomis was able to massage that and manage that, but you can't get into an F-bomb match with Jerry Jones every other day? How would that look, Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's something he'd have to negotiate and navigate, but he's been there before, and he knows those guys very well, even socially. He hangs out with those guys. So I don't think that's an issue. I think he would see the pros outweighing the cons. And I agree with you. I think one of the problems the Cowboys have is that the general managers are the owners, and when you see the team being undisciplined and everyone wants to come down on Mike McCarthy, a lot of that, in my opinion, is because the Cowboys don't really put a high premium on a lot of the things that the Saints do here, and that is, disciplined players, guys that aren't going to make mental errors. The Cowboys don't care about that. They just want talent. It's kind of the old Al Davis kind of mentality, and that can come back to haunt them, as we even saw last night in their game. They were very undisciplined in a lot of ways, and they still won because they overwhelmed them with talent. But I think Peyton would be a perfect fit for that because he would, his attention to detail, his ability to keep his teams disciplined and mentally tough, that's one of his great strengths. And I think that's exactly the kind of thing that Dallas would thrive on, at least that roster.
Okay. Yeah, because, I think I think Dak does an unbelievable job considering what you just described. It's a clown act to a certain extent there. And because of Jerry and Steve, they don't answer to anybody. They're the owners. They can't the sense of urgency isn't there because they're the GM owner and everything else. I almost feel like Dak's attention to detail and leadership tries to keep them in between the lines. How do you see it from afar, Jeff Duncan?
Well, look, I think he's got to take responsibility for some of this. I mean, his interception totals are what they are. They've got to be. They're not all on him. But last night, one of them definitely would hit the guy right in the numbers. Those are the kind of things I think that are holding this team back. The penalty issues. I do think Dak Prescott would be an asset in the mind of Sean Payton. He would look at him as a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, and that roster is loaded with talent. I mean, they've got playmakers everywhere, both sides of the ball. That's why I give them a great shot to win the Super Bowl this year. I know a lot of people don't see that, but they showed the other day beating the Eagles. They can beat anybody in the league when they're focused and into it. The talent is just overwhelming. So I think it wouldn't be a done deal, Bo, if it opened up at all. I think it'd be a heavy consideration for Peyton. And a big part of it would be because there's really no other options out there. I think the most important thing to Sean right now in his next stop is going to be, where can I win another Super Bowl? He's won one. He's a Hall of Fame coach if he wins a second one. I think that drives him. He wants to be at the highest level of success. He wants to be in the mix every year. I go back to the quote Bill Parcells that he repeats all the time. Parcells told him there's 10 or 12 franchises in the league that are functional in the playoff hunt every year. You want to be in one of those organizations. The rest are just swimming in circles and can't stay out of their own way. And I think Sean's going to land in one of those 10 or 12 in his mind that are functional. He's not going to go and try and reinvent the wheel the way he did here in New Orleans. That was difficult sledding, and he's going to be a legend here forever because of it. I don't think he wants to do that this time around in his career.
Yeah, what he did in New Orleans, just nothing short of remarkable. Jeff Duncan, NOLA.com on the Yuengling Lager guest line. All right, let's jump around a little bit here. What do you make of Russell Wilson? Is it Denver? Is it that Seattle did a much better job than we think they did with what they did with him? Is he a shot fighter? He bounces back? How does Jeff Duncan see it after 30 years in the NFL?
No, I think it's a Russell Wilson issue. There's too much smoke there from within the Seahawks organization, right? You've seen some of the comments from Richard Sherman. I think there's some definite intangible factors that he lacks in terms of being the quarterback and face of the franchise. You have to be the CEO. You have to be the general, everything. That's such a hard position. There's so many things that go into it. And all those factors have to add up if you're going to be truly great. And I think there's something lacking there. Whether, I've heard people say, he's kind of a phony leader. People don't buy in. There's something there that's missing. And that certainly has manifested itself in Denver when he also doesn't have the infrastructure, the organizational support of a Pete Carroll and a good coaching staff. It unraveled on him there. Now, I think a lot of that is Denver's fault, but you can't hide from the fact that Seattle wanted to move on from him and has done well without him. I think that says a lot.
You mentioned that that the Saints and Mickey Loomis and Miss Benson are kind of in a good spot with Dennis Allen and the way this team is maybe playing and finishing. We know the NFC South is, close to garbage this year, but what do you think the Saints are going to do? What can they do? What would be their options at the quarterback position? Jeff?
I'm writing about that right now, so it's perfect timing. I don't know what they're going to do. I think they've got a very difficult road ahead. I see a major transition and overhaul this offseason. A much bigger roster transition this offseason than what we saw last offseason. I understand what they were trying to do, Bo. They went in and said, look, we've got a good roster. let's keep the status quo, the same coaching staff. Let's keep most of the roster intact, the leadership, this culture we've fostered over the years. It worked. It's worked before. It's going to work. And it didn't work this year. It all kind of fell apart. The roster wasn't as good as they thought. Some parts of the roster aged. And now they've got a major transition to make. They've got to move in a new direction. And at quarterback, I don't see a lot of great options. I'll be shocked if Jameis Winston is back. They can move on from his contract after this season. I think a fresh start for him would be welcome. Probably need to get him somewhere else. Now, do you bring back Andy Dalton as your stopgap kind of transition quarterback and draft a young one? Or do you try to find one on the free agent market that's an upgrade over Dalton? I know they like Dalton. I think he's a perfect backup quarterback in this league, actually one of the best you could get. But I think he's a backup quarterback. And I think in games like they had this Sunday, when they step up in class and they play against elite teams like the Bengals, like the Ravens, that gets exposed. They're not good enough at the quarterback position. And I don't see any options outside of him right now unless they get into the quarterback market with Garoppolo, or I don't think Geno Smith will make it to the free agent market. The Gardner Minshews of the world aren't upgrades over Dalton. I think it could be
Let's talk about Minshew for a second. We're biased here because he's from here.
Yes.
So you're not. You're just looking at this like, hey, I've been in this game for a long time. How do you see Gardner Minshew? Do you see him as a spot starter / excellent backup for several more years? Jacksonville, when he was there, Jacksonville was totally dysfunctional when he was there. And I feel he did a great job hanging on to him. What do you see in Gardner Minshew?
I think he's a very good player. I mean, I think he would be a lower end starter in the league. I think he would be very similar to a Dalton. I mean, there's a phrase in scouting circles and personnel circles in the NFL when they characterize quarterbacks. They designate them as either a truck or a trailer. If you're the truck, you're carrying the organization. You're carrying the roster of the team. If you're the trailer, the team is carrying you. And you can win both ways in the league, but if you're going to be the trailer, you got to be good in the rest of the roster, right? The defense has to carry you. That's kind of what Vrabel did in Tennessee with Tannehill.
Yeah.
They said, we got a guy, he can be the trailer, but we're going to be good everywhere else. Derrick Henry, we're going to run the ball, we're going to play good defense. We're not going to make mistakes. That's the perfect situation with a trailer. That's what the Saints tried to do this year. And the roster wasn't good enough around the trailer, and it fell apart. That's the philosophy that you can win with in the NFL if you don't have a truck. And let's face it, there's very few elite quarterbacks that can carry a team. The Saints had one for 15 years, and they're learning the hard way what it's like, what the other half of the NFL lived like for those 15 years when you're scrambling around trying to find somebody at that position. It's very difficult. Everybody in the league wants one of those guys.
Jeff Duncan, Saints Insider, NOLA.com on the Out of Bounds show, and the Yuengling Lager guest line. You wrote about this in your book, Peyton and Breeze. Let's talk Drew Brees for a second. With somebody that focused, kind of militaristic, loves the structure, loves the grind, the schedule. You went in depth with that about how Sean and Drew fed off each other perfectly, and it's rare that you get that cocktail in the NFL. It looks to me, I think Breeze wants a very structured schedule and wants to be wanted and all that. And he looks like he may be trying to find what he wants to do. The broadcasting didn't work. Now he's a Purdue interim assistant, whatever. Where do you see this going with Drew Brees, the way he's wired, Jeff?
I think he's going to continue to do what he's doing, very similar to the way Peyton Manning is wearing a lot of different hats, doing a little media, staying connected to the game, has a lot of business ventures, spending time with their young families. That's the most important thing for Drew right now is his family time. His kids are at the age where he really wants to be involved with they're just getting into sports, and he wants to have that flexible free time. So when I heard he was going to be an interim with Purdue, it made perfect sense to me. it's like a 2-week run. He gets to get back into the game a little bit, but people trying to act like he was going to coach, that was never a possibility. I mean, that is so far beyond what Drew Brees wants to do. I just know how he's wired. I mean, coaching is long, thankless hours. I've talked to Zach Streif over and over about it. I mean, he had to think long and hard about leaving the broadcast booth to get into coaching again because he's got a young family and how much time it takes you away from your family. Brees' top priority is his family. I don't see him going into that direction at all. Maybe a front office executive type job down the road, something like that. I could see that happening, but I think he'll get back into media work before he does that.
Okay. So were you surprised that the media deal went the way it did this first time?
Not really. I mean, I didn't think he was as bad as everybody said he was. I mean, there's a lot of groupthink out there, as you know, Bo. I mean, all of a sudden it just becomes a thing. I never watched the games and said, boy, Drew's terrible. I never thought he was great, but I've heard a lot of people. Maybe I'm just not critical enough in that world, but I know flying to Stamford, Connecticut was not his cup of tea from his San Diego base. And again, more time away from the family. He wanted to do more games on the West Coast, and that's not where NBC really wanted him to do it. So I think the time, restraints was a big problem for him, but I think he'll get back into it, maybe on a limited basis in the future.
Okay. Yeah. I see where you're going. I mean, Jason Garrett and Tony Dungy are absolutely boring. I mean, that's watching paint dry. So we'll see what they do as far as shaking that up. All right, man. Sugar Bowl. Sugar Bowl doesn't really have a buzz. I mean, Bama expects to be in the playoffs and in the national championship game and win. Now, it's a big deal for Kansas State. So are you seeing a lot of Kansas State, colors around town? How's it look?
Yeah. Yeah, that was downtown yesterday. There was a ton of Kansas State people here. I view that game a lot like this Tulane Southern Cal game at the Cotton Bowl. You're going to have a lot more alums traveling for that game from the underdog. It means more to them. It's going to be obviously a statement-type game for Kansas State, a statement game for Tulane. Those are blue blood programs. But I just don't know if either of those teams can – if both those teams come, Alabama and Southern Cal, come to play and are focused, and I think they will be, then I think it's going to be difficult for the other team. I think the talent will overwhelm Kansas State in this game. I think given Saban a month or 3 weeks to game plan, I think it's going to be difficult for them to move the ball as well. Even with this Alabama defense that's not a vintage Alabama defense, I think they might struggle in this game.
I tell you what, Jeff Duncan, Willie Fritz is one hell of a football coach for Tulane. God.
Better believe it. To do what he did at that school, impressive.
Hey, Happy New Year. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, anytime, Bo. Take care, buddy.
Jeff Duncan on the Out of Bounds Show, NOLA.com, his book, which is outstanding. Payton and Breeze, the men who built the greatest offense in NFL history. I'm jealous of Jeff Duncan because he's got a relationship with Sean Payton, and I would love to have dinner with Sean Payton. And we've had dinner with some really cool people over the last 20 years. We are the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Brought to you by Fleetway Market. All of your road trips, fuel up at Fleetway Market in Gluckstadt, Madison, Dogwood, and their other 20 locations. Don't forget about the Market Cafe in Gluckstadt. Back in a sec.